let's give an example, but placing 500k within a bank,
Yeah.
getting a 500k mortgage.
Yeah.
Don't forget, I told you prior that 4% is basically the average rate, but you can still place your assets, place your money, and maybe obtain a little more out of it.
Okay.
So placing money in France or in the US, because I'm also able to do that, meaning that you can buy a property in France, get a loan, get a loan in France,
Yeah.
but at the same time place your assets in the US.
Hello everyone, this is Kyla Puech, real estate in the south of France, in Provence. I'm here today with Julien Emard, who's my favorite broker in real estate. He's going to carry on the chat that we had in the previous videos. We're back in this amazing area in the south of France where we're just north of Aix-en-Provence in the Sud-Luberon. It's just absolutely divine, as you can see once again. And today I thought it would be useful to look at what happens when we want to sell. From a financial point of view, can you give us like a bit of guidance on that part?
Yes. First of all, we need to consider the why you're selling, which is important also. Buying a property is a long process in France, like we mentioned in your previous videos, but there are different impacts. If you're buying a property as your primary residency, there's no impact on taxes. You can resell it and buy a new house, call again Kyla and find a new place. There's no fees upon this.
There's no capital gains tax.
No, exactly.
Right, so that's easy.
That's an easy one. If you have bought previously a secondary house, in that case, you have some taxes, but you have taxes on the capital gain, which would maybe frighten some people depending on the countries where they come from. But the reality is that in the south of France, in France in general, but especially I'd say in the south of France, you will not be making double the price on a house in 5 years' time. This is not how our market works. It's not a speculative market where when buying a property you're already thinking that you're going to sell it for 20% more. This does not happen here.
And I guess that kind of like in the last video that we did together, you talked about the legal fees and the other fees and kind of like mentioned like 10 to 12% like on top of the price. So I guess it takes time to absorb.
Absolutely.
That 10%.
It takes time, and also we said from the start that we work on fixed rate mortgage for a duration of 15, 20 years. So when buying a property, you know already what's going to happen in the next 20 years and how much you're going to pay. The difference with different countries is that this can be variables, meaning that every 5 years you need to renegotiate your mortgage, and it's true that in that case you want to resell. I think something important is also here in the south of France, we have more demand, so clients looking for a house than houses to buy. And that also makes the market pretty stable. We also do not have the bad impact of having a market which fluctuates too much, meaning that we do not have a market which drops. You're pretty better than me to actually explain that to your listeners, but the market hasn't dropped when the rains went up. It really was pretty stable.
Some areas in France, of course, did see a massive drop, but in Provence, you know, it's an investment that's pretty safe, and we don't see the drops that we have seen in other parts of France.
And south of France is also in our DNA for the Provençal to own what we call the stone. So owning a property means a lot in the south of France. So this is why also when buying a property, you usually keep it for many years. The average in France when buying a primary house is usually a resale within 10 years, 8 to 10 years. But when coming from abroad, buying a property in the south of France, it can happen that you keep it forever.
Obviously, every client is different, so there are reasons for selling, which is why you're saying the reasons are really important. The notaire, I guess, or the accountant is the best person to calculate what that impact is going to be on your taxes.
Correct. We call them usually experts comptables, so they're what in the US we call CPAs or accountants. They're the best ones to actually give you all this calculation. What will be the impact? The notaire is also a good asset. A lawyer can be also a good asset for giving you all the kind of notion of what would that mean and what would be the calculation.
And I guess what's important to note is if you are selling in France, you don't pay the notaire fees.
No.
Or the legal fees, I should say, because in France we call it les frais de notaire, but actually it's like your legal fees, and the notaire only gets a very small percentage of the 8% that we talk about. So it's only the buyer that pays that.
Correct.
So as a seller, you're not going to pay it a second time round.
You're right, and just also to have a notion that a notaire in France is one of the few jobs where they actually all the legal advices that a notaire can give you prior any operation are free. Because
that's
it's
true.
Something very important.
Yeah.
You can go knock in the door of a notaire, ask him a question, and he will not charge you for that.
Which is also why notaires are often very busy.
You're right.
So it's good to have a good relationship with your notaire so that you can ask the question and get an answer.
You're right. Yes.
Quite soon, because otherwise you might be waiting your turn in a long list of questions that they might have sitting in their inbox. So in terms of the resale, what's important to know is the capital gains tax is only going to be paid on secondary residences. You don't pay your notaire fees on as a seller.
I was going to say, I think that's maybe the same thing. There's also, because we're talking about taxes, there is the real estate wealth tax. Which exists. Usually,
so tell us about that, because I think that's a 1.3 magic number, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a 1.3 million. So over the value of 1.3 million on the property, you actually have a tax which is applied.
That's when you're buying.
That's when you're buying.
Yeah.
But if you're getting a mortgage, until you actually have paid off your mortgage, so until the next 20 years, you're not necessarily impacted by this tax.
Okay, so let me get this right. If I have 1.3 million cash,
yes,
you're saying that as a buyer, I'm better off getting a mortgage, even if it's a small mortgage, because then I avoid that wealth tax.
You're right. It's a kind of calculation. You may be better off placing, let's give an example, but placing 500k within a bank, getting a 500k mortgage. Yeah. Don't forget, I told you prior that 4% is basically the average rate. But you can still place your assets, place your money, and maybe obtain a little more out of it. Okay. So placing money in France or in the US, because I'm also able to do that, I'm meaning that you can buy a property in France, get a loan in France, but at the same time place your assets in the US. Okay. It's a good combination in order to avoid tax and gain a bit of money, or at least not be losing money on the interest rate.
Okay, so that's really interesting, because I think the wealth tax is often something that comes up, and I've had clients who said, you know, what about the wealth tax? The house that I'm wanting is over 1.3 million. Where do I sit with that? And actually the relatively straightforward answer is go and see Julien Emard. But more to the point, even if you don't really need it, get a small mortgage to help manage that.
It's easy to define what would be the cost of a mortgage and what would be also in a way the gain of getting a mortgage in France.
Absolutely. I'm really pleased we're having these conversations, and I guess you are too. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
See you next time.